How does the TaylorMade Stealth driver help club golfers? We sent 4 down to the Belfry to find out. The Stealth driver performed really well for me when I tested it out earlier this year, but we wanted to see how players would get on who have a wide range of different handicaps. First up we had John. He was a 16 handicapper and he was already pretty well fit into a Callaway GBB Epic driver, and to be honest it was working pretty well for his game. The big area where he was lacking was kind of in dispersion. There were sometimes he would get some shots that got very high spin numbers and he just couldn't control them that well. So here really the key was changing the shaft a little bit. He is a bit older than when he got fit before and he wanted something that was more whippy to give him a little bit more control. We went down to a regular shaft and we also went into the Stealth head. This saw him get 2 mph more ball speed and also just under 6 yards extra carry. But the big difference here for John was in his dispersion, which was massively decreased, and he got rid of that kind of nasty right shot that he was struggling with. Overall here, the key was about dispersion and getting more consistency, which I think is something people overlook sometimes when they're going for a driver fitting.
It was really good. He was very clear about what he was trying to achieve. I felt that I've now got something that will really help me when I'm playing back at my club. So yeah, it was a really enjoyable experience. You didn't feel intimidated. You could just go in there, do your best, and they're not there to catch you out. They're not there. It's not a lesson. Their job, as he made very clear to me, was to help you as much as they can, and really focus on, you know, how good is your bad shot, because that's what a lot of us will play in a round of golf. So I'd say go and enjoy it. It's a really fun experience. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Next up was Charlie, a 2 handicapper, and this was a classic example of someone using an old driver that they liked but just wasn't getting the most out of what they'd got. Charlie had a TaylorMade R11 in his bag, and he'd been using it pretty much forever. He was very consistent with it, but he had quite a low ball flight and was definitely losing out on distance. Charlie gained 6 mph club head speed as soon as we swapped him into the new Stealth Plus, which is pretty impressive. This resulted in lots more ball speed, 8 mph more, and over 23 yards of extra carry, which is obviously game-changing when you think about not only how far down the fairway you are, but also how much less club he's going to have into the greens. Not only did he increase his distance massively, he also lowered his dispersion. Now this was done by reducing spin because he moved from a stiff shaft into an extra stiff. He was swinging it at 116 mph, so this was definitely needed. I think this really shows you the importance of keeping testing out new equipment, even if you're happy with what you got, because in this case, Charlie just didn't really know what he was missing, and that extra 20 yards is going to make a massive difference to his game.
Loved it, yeah. It was a good experience. My driver is very old. It's interesting to see the difference in the numbers, especially for me, the distance. My old driver was going 260, whereas the new one that I've got, it's going much further. I always knew that I could get a bit more yardage, but not the numbers that the new TaylorMade driver was offering. It's a great experience. The team there are really helpful, and they'll make sure that they cater right for you and get the right driver. Do it, it'll improve your game, you'll knock a couple of shots off, and for me, distance as well, really pivotal to getting the handicap down.
Brenda was a 20 handicapper who came to us with a driver that she'd bought off her friend. Sound familiar? To be honest, it wasn't a great fit for her at all. She was in a TaylorMade Tour burner, which is a typically low spinning head, and she also had a men's flex and length shaft in this, which really wasn't suiting her given she wasn't the tallest and she doesn't have the quickest club head speed. She even told us that she hit her 3-wood further, but she just liked this driver. Straight away we put her into a TaylorMade Stealth HD women's option, and you could see her club head speed and her distance go straight up. Now a big thing about this was it had a shorter shaft, so it meant Brenda could find the middle of the club face easier. Previously she was hitting the heel a lot because the shaft was too long, and it meant she was losing out in terms of distance and dispersion. The HD head also helps with that draw, so it gives you more draw bias and helps straighten out those left to right shots. We also switched Brenda into a higher lofted head, moving her from her 10.5 to a 12 degree. This meant she could get more launch, more height, and ultimately more carry distance. Overall, we managed to get an extra 7 mph of ball speed and nearly 50 mph extra carry distance without changing her swing at all. That's a pretty big difference.
Never been through anything like that before. Once for a set of irons, but never for a driver, and it was great. It certainly seemed to be going straighter more often, yes. Certainly makes a difference.
James was a classic example of someone who's changed their swing, but then not changed their driver to match. Previously he had a TaylorMade M6, which had a pretty high loft on it because that was what he previously needed. But after changing his swing, he'd used the adjustable hosel and knocked down the loft because it was simply flying too high for him. The problem with this one, it's opened the club face up, so he was losing shots out to the right. So straight away we moved lofts. We actually dropped down into a 9-degree Stealth head, but then lofted this up to 10.5. This meant the face was slightly shut, so he got that desired height, but also got a little bit of draw bias to help him out with that right shot. Another really interesting thing here was the shaft choice. James was stuck between two, and there was one that when he hit it 100% full out, he controlled really well. But if he slowed down a little bit, he really lost that overall dispersion and control. Now, when talking with the fitter, James stated that he doesn't actually swing full out on the course because he doesn't feel that comfortable doing so. So it made no sense to go into the shaft that yes, he could hit a little bit further, but he wouldn't necessarily control as well if he slowed down. So we actually moved into the other shaft, but we still saw 5 miles an hour of ball speed gains and 14 yards of extra carry distance. So it just goes to show you, not everything's about getting the most distance. You've really got to balance off that dispersion and control, and also think about what you do on the golf course, not just what you do on the driving range.
The guys were really sort of made you relaxed and comfortable. Yeah, it's just a really great experience. What's mine 3 years old compared to that, so I was carrying it further, straighter, and the bad ones weren't as bad as they were with my old one. So yeah, it's really good. I'd definitely 100% recommend it. Buying off the shelf's great, but coming and speaking to these guys who've got all the experience and the knowledge, of especially the current products, they can play with shafts that maybe you can't get in a pro shop or another golf shop, and you might gain an extra 10, 15, 20 yards out of it, or just have a better shot. So I'd highly recommend going to get fitted by one of these guys.
So there you have it. 4 different golfers who've nearly gone into the identical club head, but all gained masses in terms of performance. It really goes to show just how much a proper fitting and changing the head, the loft and the shaft makes a huge difference to your driver performance.